If we start up at Lifford and Strabane, and the border comes right down the centre of the river the whole way, so Tyrone is facing Donegal for most of that river. Then it comes to the outskirts of the city of Derry, and the border loops inland just to include the city. You know, it just kind of sends an arm in like that and protectively around the city, and then it goes back out into the foil again, where it's Derry and Donegal facing each other across the border. So it's a border town in a very, very tight sense, because the border is literally a little fence around it. So you can't walk anywhere in the West Bank for more than 10-15 minutes, you know, from the edge of the city, and you're probably over the border. Once you cross the border, you were in beautiful countryside. You were in what you might call landscape and seascape country, and you know, that just happens to be an accident of where we were geographically. I suppose with the advent of the Troubles and the borders meant long delays at checkpoints and all the rest of it. So when you got past that, there was this kind of sense of relief or a kind of sense of escape. Almost. You did have this sense of more freedom and a more beautiful, you know, the blue skies of the Republic as opposed to the grey skies, so to speak. So that's always kind of been with me, but it only refers to the border immediately around where I am. I don't get that sense when I cross the border elsewhere.
I think that the Derry-Donegal border is very different than the Fermanagh-Monaghan or the Fermanagh-Cavan border for a range of reasons. I think mainly is that Derry is such a huge city that that there are routes in and out of it in ways that citizens of Donegal would come and see, but also citizens from here, from this city, would go to visit Donegal for different reasons. A lot of leisure time is spent in Donegal as well. So it's a very different border in that respect.
Here we're in the heart of the Laggan area of Donegal, or what was unofficially referred to as the Laggan or the lowlands of Donegal. We're in an area that's very culturally rich, because here in this part of Donegal is where a lot of the Scottish planters settled during the early period of 1600s. And those families, the descendants of those settlers, are still in here, and the names in the local district reflect that. The church across the street is probably the oldest or second oldest Presbyterian church in the whole of Ireland. The last residence of the manse was Reverend McSparn, who retired in 1987. So it's been unoccupied since that time, and in the last few years this has become a heritage centre, specifically around Ulster Scots-Irish content.
I'm an Ulster Scots speaker. My father employed two men on the farm. One was a Catholic and the other was a Church of Ireland, and they spoke nothing else. And of course, we had this language, but we also, when we were in the house, we spoke proper English. And when I went into Derry, Londonderry to school in there, I was smart enough to know not to use that because it was frowned on.
I was born in the townland of Monreagh, which is close to the village of Bridgend. We were next door to the local Orange Hall, of which my father was caretaker and a member, and which I eventually became a member and still am, and have 50 years service done.
People maybe not realise just how large the Protestant Ulster Scots population is here. And this particular area, it's about 36%.
My memories of those early years were very happy ones of playing with our Roman Catholic neighbours. And memories of the Orange Hall was there were dances in it, and both sides of the community took part.
I'm living in the same house I was born in. I was born in 1935, the same year as Elvis Presley. We had just a kitchen and 2 rooms. It was hard times then. You know, there was no money, they had no dole, they had no nothing. Just whatever money they made selling turf. And I remember leaving Chandler, that's about 3 miles outside Buncrana, and going to Derry with a horse and cart. I was only 12 and I thought it was great crack getting to Derry with my father. We'd arrive at the border and we'd have to stand there till he would come and open the border, as we called it. And we would get through there, and you'd bag the turf then, you had a bite to eat and you would head home. So you didn't get home till about 8 o'clock at night. And when the pounds that they made to be about roughly £3.50.
My wife was a teacher. She came from a part of Inishowen from Carndonagh where the Ulster Scots language wouldn't be used a lot. And she came to teach here now. Around here it is widely spoken. And she had never come across it before. And she wasn't here 2 months till she told me the children here have terrible bad English. And I told her, no, that's a remnant of the plantation.
I got married in 1969 and we moved across the border then. And when I mean across the border, I was 10 yards on the northern side of the border. Now that was in 1969. That was really the start of the Troubles as we know them.
Troubles didn't bother the music for some reason. I remember there was people used to come down. We would have a session in the Excelsior Bar out the back. And there was a fella called Cal Feather and another fella, I can't remember his name now, but they were high up in the guard, what we call the police in Derry. It made no difference to them, it made no difference to us. We were dying to see them, it was lovely to see the strangers. And when we went to Derry, you never thought who was a Protestant or who was a Catholic. Never thought about it, and thank God.
My mother and father still lived in Donegal, and we kept close with them, as did a brother, my oldest brother, who was a serving British Army officer at the time.
What we have here in Monreagh is a cultural centre, so I don't think culture is a threat to anybody. We have people who come in here. In fact, I think there's probably more people from the Catholic community coming in here now out of curiosity to see what we have in here.
We are opening a new heritage centre in Inishowen, the Sleeve Snack Centre. So we came up here to have a look around. I met the manager, Kieran Fagan. So what we're planning on doing is hopefully bringing groups here, getting them to stay for 4 or 5 days. Have a, look at sort of the Irish Catholic community, the Irish Ulster Scots community, and one of us would have enough for 1 or 2 or 3 days, and the other would have enough for 1 or 2 or 3 days, so we'd have enough to keep them there for a week to spend a few more dollars.
My great-grandmother, Sarah Anderson, was from this area, and she was Presbyterian, she married, obviously, my great-grandfather who was Roman Catholic, and the two of them came. So I have mixed roots. Like most people, when you go back in your family history, there's no pure blood.
Ireland is on the periphery of Europe and we're in the periphery of Ireland. Neither north or south, and maybe a bit of no man's land when it comes to investment. In the 1950s, and it's fairly well documented, too, that stretch of the River Foyle between Lifford and Derry had one of the highest catches of commercial salmon in Europe. The men could go to the river and catch the fish, and the businesses did well in the area. Children might have got shoes, school books bought for the winter, maybe a new roof. 5 or 6 years ago, all the licences on the river were decommissioned, and it is a huge loss to the area. We have a higher level of disadvantage here than we have in other parts of the country. I think we're on a par with inner city Dublin. My own background is growing up in the post office, so everybody came into the post office, and the family that I grew up in, we were brought up as Catholics, but I think we were Christians first and foremost, and there was great respect that, for everybody, having the right to practice their faith and to practice their religion.
We never talked about religion in our house, it never was mentioned. Everybody was a human and that was it. We mixed in with everybody.
When we lived in Towers Lane, God, we used to come over on the 12th, over to Carrigan's when they used to have a band. We used to come over to see the band coming back in the evening and, all that, I don't know, I couldn't understand why. Couldn't get on. Where did people go on a Sunday? It didn't matter, there was none of our business. If they went, it shouldn't have made any difference.
I grew up in the village myself, and it was mixed. There was plenty of girls my age, but we went to different schools. We socialised in different circles. We met each other in the street, and we may have, had conversations, but there was no real close friendships, you know. And I think it was always down to that kind of segregations in the schools.
And then when we went to secondary school, we went to a mixed school, which was another good thing. And all of my friends, most of them were Presbyterians or Protestants, and I'm actually married to one, so it made no odds to me what anybody was.
And I suppose when the Troubles crept in, all those people that lived in the street, all those girls that I talked about, their families moved out of St Johnston. My father it was a family, it came from a family of 14, and they worked really, really hard. And he would have talked to us, you know, like about, saving up money, struggling, trying to buy land. And trying to buy land in the Laggan for a Catholic was a very difficult thing to do. How they had to look for allies, maybe within the Protestant community that were kind of very supportive of what they were doing. And there was a lot of people like that who, would have saw that as, trying to keep people down, not allowing them to buy land and not allowing them to develop their farm and stuff like that.
Like even for funerals, anything like that, anybody died, your neighbour could have been the Protestant. That's the best neighbour you would have had coming in. Not like the North, not any disrespect to the North, but like, you know what I mean? Everybody collaborated on this side together.
We would have gone into Derry to buy clothes, different things for the house. Now, I always remember, when you went in at Christmas, the clothes that you bought for Christmas were put on over the top of the clothes that you had. And my mother would have been saying, to us, if the customs men asked you, have you anything on board? Just say no. Because there was a real fear of losing what you bought.
There was a woman in the seat opposite us and she had bought a present for somebody wrapped up in a brown paper parcel. And the customs man took it and rather crudely, I thought, just tore off the paper. Discovered some sort of wee, I don't know what it was, a wee trinket or statue or something underneath and just handed it back there. And I was appalled at the violence of this, and the intrusiveness of this.
And into Derry with my mother, which wasn't very often at the time. And she must have been going to a wedding because she bought herself a new hat. And she wore the hat out on the bus because you weren't allowed to bring it out. Like. But she took the labels and all off it, even on side label and all. And the custom man that was on must have watched her that well that when we come off the bus at Calais, the customs, he pulled her onto the hut. And him and her had a wild argument, like he tried to say she wasn't wearing this hat and that. But she got away with it, but I always remember that. Like.
And my father thought he wanted a pair of new shoes. They were called hog-nailed boots then. And my mother says, well, sure, when you're in Derry, buy yourself a pair when you sell the turf and that. He says, I'll need to watch coming through the border. So he dirtied the shoes to make sure, because I wouldn't know they were new shoes. But that was not good enough. When he was going through the border, one of the boys spotted that they were new shoes. So they took the shoes off him and sent him home in the socks with a horse and cart. And I can still remember him coming onto the street shouting to my mother, bring us out a pair of shoes there. She says, oh Jesus, Mary and Joseph, you lost the good new shoes.
Some of the most, the soundest and most respectable and God-fearing people were involved in smuggling. And if you lived near the border, it was almost like mandatory.
One of the saddest stories I heard about smuggling was told to me last year by the wee man called Bertie Bryce from Mount Island. Bertie died in October there, he was 93. He was, I presume, coming from school in the Lochswilly train. And he got into the carriage and a lady came in with what he thought was a box and put it up in the rack. And another very well-dressed gentleman in a tweed suit came in and sat down. And the train would have stopped in Bridgend and the customs men came in to see what you had or whatever. And he looked in to the carriage where they were and he saw the box up in the rack and he said, who owns this? And the lady says, it's mine. And he asked, what is it? She said, it's a coffin. She says, I think it was an only child had died and they were very poor and they got a coffin made in Derry for, I think it was £5, Bertie told me. And she said it cost, he asked how much it was and she said it was £5. Well, he said, you'll have to pay me a third of that. And Bertie told me she counted out her money. She was only 3 and 6pence. She was from Clonmany. And always says, if you can't pay, I'm going to have to lift this. So he reached for the little coffin, but the man in the tweed suit said to the custom man, he said, look, he says, you leave the coffin back. He says, and I'll pay. So he paid whatever was a third of £5, and the lady got her coffin home to bury her child.
The burn supper can be done on a formal basis or an informal basis, so we've went middle ground tonight, and it's the only burn celebration in this show.
Burns is the most famous poet in the world, and his songs are sung all over the world, even in Soviet Russia and China. Auld Lang Syne. Most of us would be planter descent. My people came over here about 16 and 20 around Rafo.
You see, people in East Donegal speak the language that is written in Burns's poetry. As a child, I was very conscious of 2 languages. You tried to speak English properly in the house, and then if you were out talking to the farm labourers or the neighbours, you'd revert to their language.
What I like to do is to emphasise the links that we have and how much we have in common instead of what is different amongst us. So when you get this opportunity of a Burns night, you want to share it with the other community, if you like. I don't even like calling them that because they are so close to us. I mean, I'm even married into them. That big long table nearest the door has got 23 people, I think, at it who are from the Creggan in Derry.
We now find that we're getting people from our neighbouring tradition, namely the Catholic tradition, and you know, that's just the way it ought to be.
When I think back on it now, I mean, it's not funny because there was injury and death that night as well. But we picked our way through soldiers lying in gardens, and the rain was coming down. And I arrived home. We were stopped several times and regarded as harmless, obviously, and allowed to go on. As we went on, I lived in the very last house in Creggan, the very last house in Derry, in fact. And by the time I got home, the rain was bucketing down, and I realised there were 2 soldiers sitting with a big Browning machine gun. I'm not au fait with all the weaponry, but one of these big machine guns on a stand with all, you know, the bullets being fed into it. And, well, they weren't firing, but they were lying in the rain up to here in our front garden. And I was, hello, I went in. So that was. I mean, there's a whole lot of things happened as a result of that, which are in the public domain and so on. But that was the night of Operation Motorman, which I won't forget because we were at Borderland, just over the border that night at a dance. And again, the contrast between the 2 worlds was just overwhelming, just totally staggering, you know.
It was tough in the sense that you were more scared than you were anything else for your life at times because of who you were and where you were at.
What I didn't know, and didn't know for a number of months after the particular incident happened, that I was under threat from the IRA because as a young Protestant living close to the border, I was perceived to be a member of the Ulster Defence Regiment. Now, it was a very good Roman Catholic friend of mine who warned me.
The army checkpoint was down at Nixon's Corner, but on the way in, down by the glen, there's a big wall beside the foil, and the army had stopped us. There's so many of them, all sort of in hunkers, pointing guns to the far side. And I remember we were all taken off the bus because they were shooting from one side to the other. And that put fear in me every time I was going to Derry.
My car was parked beside the Sanger, and I drove home at that time 2 new buildings. A space of 3 or 4 minutes when I heard the explosion. I found out later that night that the terrorists had walked along the city walls and dropped a bomb in the Sanger, and the 2 soldiers were killed. And I was parked right beside it, and had left literally 4 or 5 minutes before it went off.
4 of them, max on them, and one boy just jumped on just beside me just. And he to me, get out, he says, F out, he pulled me sort of away, more or less through in the road, but down to halfway down the gym street, there was about 6 police Land Rovers. And he seen me jumping out, you see, and he started to move up. But the man was away with the van.
The police were at the bridge, Craigavon Bridge. I says, what's going on? He says, there's a bomb. Well, I tell you, my legs were shaking. I could hardly get the car turned quick enough to get out the road.
Next thing, this boy stepped out, 6-footer with a mask on him. And I knew the road to get back in my hand because I was on twice a week for years, you know. And I started to reverse back, put the van in reverse, the next thing I fired at me. Bullet. I thought it was toy gun.
And then the last experience I had, there was another bomb and we couldn't get out the road. We know the Abercorn and the roundabout there. We had to go up there because of the bomb, and the first thing I seen was the robot. And that just freaked me out.
And he clapped me on down here. The other boy used to have a gun, he just clapped me down. And he said, F off. I said, I never know, you get no van. He said, walk away, he said. Pulled the key out, I took the key with him.
I never heard shooting before in my life, like, and I was in and out in Derry all, even when the Paul was going, as I was never caught up in bomb scares or nothing like that. And I heard the shooting, and where did we run to? We run to a window. And instead of that, we were told to get down on the floor.
I'm the founder of the Columba Community of Prayer and Reconciliation, which we opened up and started in Derry in 1981. And we were going to prison a lot of those days, and we were praying for a place in the country. If we had a place in the country, going to prison, fellas coming out of prison, the middle of the city wasn't the place for them. And lo and behold, within a week or so, a man whom I had gone to thank for, he gave a donation to Columba House, and his wife said he's up on the farm near the border. So we came up to rent a couple of acres, and he literally that day said, there's an old house there, you could put potatoes in it. I said, if you don't mind, I would go in there. We wanted a retreat centre. Guys came here, we had a guy here who was 54 days in hunger strike, 57, and then Liam, and came off the hunger strike, had a tremendous conversion, went back and did his time in prison, met a young loyalist fella, Jimmy Gibson, and they became great friends, and both of them would have come here. And I thought when I saw both of them relating so well, this is the way we need to be. The barriers had broken down in their hearts and their minds, and they had this trust and joy. We wanted a quiet place, and we certainly got it. We were isolated up here, and there was an old tin-roofed house, abandoned farm, and the neighbours, 22 men for a few weekends. It was like the Amish people. They came around and rebuilt the thing. Not one person was paid. It was a beautiful spirit. It still is. The White Oaks evolved out of here. This was the exact office for building a £2 million centre over the road there. And we had no money, and yet we had a lot of people coming here who were, we weren't professionally qualified to help. There were alcoholic type people who would come for a few days, excuse me, but they would also leave disgruntled, and one poor fellow, a young Protestant fellow, a businessman actually, 2 days after he left, he died in his own vomit, literally. That's how he was found. And we felt this is it. We need to do something for these people wandering in here thinking they're going to get help. We're not qualified. Addiction is a specialised work. So now we have the White Oaks. Well, it didn't come that simple, but it really took our lives, to be quite frank. And it's the best thing we've ever done. I think country people relate better, you know, like a neighbour here in terms of, I don't know what his politics are, and I couldn't care less. But he's a fine gentleman, a Protestant farmer, and just next over the border. And, well, you stop and chat. You chat about the crops and you talk about the weather. There's just more of a chance to meet in the country. I come from down the road there in Newton-Connicum, down Fawn. So Protestantism, I suppose the highest group of Presbyterians in the Republic of Ireland, outside the Pale of Dublin, would come from what we call the Laggan Valley of Donegal. So I grew up in that atmosphere. And relationships are good. it used to be, we had the Orange marches and Newton, and then we had the AOH hall next to that, and they would swap rig outs and swap bagpipes and things like that.
There's a very strong sense, I think, of internationalism has developed. The last year, I mean, the City of Culture year, I think, was it wasn't a turning point, it was simply a reflection of something, a momentum that was already there, and that is a sense that our young people, younger generations, feel that they belong to a much, much, much bigger world than the one that we maybe would try misguidedly to trap them into. They belong to this, Australia, South America. They've all travelled there. They've all been to Europe,
60 schools in the Derry City Council area. Now that embraces the Catholic, the Protestant school, the primary and the post-primary, the Irish medium, the integrated and the special care schools, and another 10 schools out along the Donegal side of the border, and all of these schools consented to compose peace pledges. Can I read just the kinds of things that are being said out on this side of the border? St. Bathan's, a lovely little Catholic school on the outskirts of St. Johnston. The young people there responded in this kind of way: we are peaceful people. We live in a peaceful community. We pledge to carry this peace with us wherever we go. That's amazing. These are words that adults who are heavy burdened because of how they have lived life in the past during the Troubles, these are words that adults need to hear. Then Monreagh, the school attached to our own church here, here's what the young people are telling us: to respect and listen to each other's opinions. Wow. Hey, adults, tune in, please. So that we can create a community of peace and harmony.
Most of my kids in their 20s now have seen far, far more of the word than I have ever done or ever will do. And that's their outlook. It's a kind of internationalist kind of look at things. And they're not the jet set by any means. They're just ordinary people struggling to find a career, a livelihood.
Our children, when they look around, they're not seeing orange and green. They're not seeing people who are Irish and who are British. They're seeing people. And I think our young people, more than ever, are ready to do what we all need to do, and that's not turn from each other or turn on each other, but turn towards each other.
They're not confined in their imaginations in the way that a border can confine you physically. And I think in the past the border did confine us physically. And it did confine you in your imagination to an extent as well. Some of that confinement may have been enrichment, by way of, well, stay small, dig deep, and look what you actually do have. But I think that sense of being shackled, so to speak, has definitely gone. And I think that people's horizons are much, much, much vastly wider than they would have been when I was growing up.